Howdy class, my name is Estrada, and today I'm going to be going over an article from Brookings called Can Journalism Survive AI? So basically the idea that this article goes over is that there's an increasing use of AI in news, journalism, and by journalists specifically, and it's been seen and tracked that journalists are now using AI to write first drafts, do edits on their work, make headlines, and make captions. So, the problem that the article finds with AI in journalism is the ethical red flag that it brings up. We place certain trust in journalists and in the human part of their work. And because journalism is built on trust, we have to be able to put trust in the human aspect of it, not necessarily in the artificial part of AI. And if audiences start to suspect that what they're reading is human, then the whole institution of journalism can fall apart. And the idea for this is based upon the fact that journalism is one of the most person to person type experiences that we see in media. It goes on with people from the news, journalists specifically, going out and investigating and getting these stories. And what's being done with AI is AI is being taken and sometimes used to try and flesh out these stories to the point where sometimes it can be used to create even fake quotes. And that has been documented and seen, and the article does go over this in detail if you'd like to see. I'd linked it below if you'd also like to check it out. And the core ethical conflict that I'm going to be going over here is the balance between the fact that AI is now being used in a lot of facets in a lot of different organizations, top to bottom. We've talked about it all over in class, being used in the military, it's being used by the government, and now it's made its way to the news and something very mainstream for us that we take in every day, especially with what's been going on recently. I don't know if I mentioned this article was written really recently, so it takes into account just how advanced that AI has gotten and the edits that it has made to what we do overall every day. So back to on topic. The core ethical conflict that I'll be going over is basically just efficiency versus integrity. Or do we care to pump out these articles as fast as possible and with minimal time spent on them and minimal personnel required, or do we care more that there's actual people behind these articles that we're reading that a lot of times are about other people? And the stance of the article takes more or less is that journalism is suffering due to AI. And the take that I came up with overall from it is that journalism is, yes, suffering from AI. So when we look at both sides of this coin, efficiency wise, it saves time and money. And in the world that we live in today, those are the two dominant things that we look at when we think about a market, right? So if there's a way to cut costs, cut the necessity for people to have to keep working harder than they need to, then realistically, why shouldn't we do that? It works faster, it doesn't need breaks, doesn't need paid time off, and honestly, if we take a human input, it allows that human input to be more fleshed out, and a lot of times AI is really just used as assistance. And while I can see this idea that AI isn't always used AI being used in the news isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes the trust that we associate with the people behind the news can come into conflict with AI, considering the fact that a lot of times these news articles that are put out that are being assisted and edited and quoted by AI aren't actually told to the public to be AI made. However, the positives that do come of AI are now we don't have to worry so much about waiting 6 months for an article about something that happened a year ago to come out. We can have AI that works 24/7, can work overnights in ways that humans just don't have the ability to, and we can pump out news in the ways that sometimes we as consumers need it today in the fast moving world that we live in. However, with that being said, AI makes mistakes. It's very prone to such. I, the disclaimer at the bottom of ChatGPT outright tells you ChatGPT makes mistakes. Check important things. And a lot of times what we see in the news is important things and it's stuff that's worth being checked over. And we lose some of that with AI. And the trade off just isn't there. At least that's what this side of the coin argues, is that the trade off just isn't there. When mistakes happen, journalists can be held accountable and we can go to them and they can confront their mistakes. AI can't be held accountable so much because it's artificial. It's just a codex that we give into and that we feed into, and we can't do too much about it if it's not giving us the information that we desire. AI is actively evolving, and we've talked about that a lot in the class, that AI is actively evolving. However, it's not actively evolved enough to have that kind of heart and that humanitarian side that journalism requires. And that is why the take that I have is that journalism has a duty, it has a responsibility to back itself with humanity and with empathy and with morals that AI just doesn't possess. So my outright take is just going to be AI should not be used to write or edit journals or any sort of journalistic content or news made content that we put onto the air. Once we let AI take the pen, we start to lose it ourselves, and the writing starts to become not our own. It's not as, the integrity isn't as much there behind it as it used to be. And if we care so much about the time aspect of using AI, like we already do just in school, a lot of what we talked about in this course as well is that AI is just being used to make things faster, and sometimes we lose the hard work that goes into journalism, loses some of its heart, and it becomes more about just having content than what the content actually is and the truth behind the content. And sorry, I have notes up above that I've been reading off of. And this doesn't necessarily mean that AI can't be used for anything, and that we shouldn't believe that, and that we should believe that it shouldn't be, and that we should believe that it should just be completely cut off. I do believe that if we tell people that the news that they're reading is AI, and we're fully transparent and we're real about like what kind of control we're giving to it and what kind of control that the news is allowing it to have on its broadcastings, on its editings, on the totality of its stories, then AI is not bad enough to consider it completely unusable. But the reality is ratings drop when you tell people that the people that they're expecting to give their news isn't actually coming from them. However, also think if we don't want to allow it to go that far, of course you can just use AI for background tasks. You can use it to read off bullet points to just give you a brief set of ideas, as AI is usually cleared to do in many facets. So just as a brief summary, the article was from Brookings, Can Journalism Survive AI? The article went over, do we believe that journalism is something that we should allow AI to infiltrate? The article says no. I personally say no. There's some heart and some just personal people backings that need to go into journalism that AI can't reciprocate. The two sides of the coin were, do we value efficiency or do we value the people aspect? And I believe that we should value the people aspect over simply content pumping. And AI feels this way overall. If we're using something that we don't feel we need to pay, that we can keep making working, that we can keep making work harder than us, it's something that I don't believe that we should use. However, feel free to make your own decisions on that. As I said, I have linked the article below if you'd like to check it out.